March 27, 1945, Tinian Island, Pacific Theater. The roar of Wright R-3350 engines splits the tropical night as massive Boeing B-29 Superfortresses lumber down the runway. But these aren't carrying the usual payload of incendiary bombs destined for Japanese cities. Tonight, they're armed with something far more sinister, thousands of naval mines that will silently strangle an empire. Navigator Donald W. Kearney adjusts his instruments, unaware that his mission will sink more enemy tonnage than years of submarine warfare combined. The Japanese have no idea what's coming. No radar can detect these weapons once they hit the water. No sonar can find them in the depths, and once they're armed, they'll wait patiently for months, claiming victim after victim. In just 5 months, these invisible killers will sink 670 ships and cripple Japan's ability to feed its people or fuel its war machine. But here's the shocking truth: the history books barely mention this devastating campaign used less than 6% of America's bombing sorties. How did a handful of night missions change the entire course of the Pacific War? And why don't we know this story? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The acrid smell of aviation fuel and hot oil fills the pressurized cabin of the Rematroid as it approaches the release point over Shimonoseki Straits. Outside, the temperature hovers at -40 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside the heated compartment, Bombardier Captain James Morrison sweats as he prepares to open the bomb bay doors. The B-29's revolutionary pressurization system allows the crew to operate without oxygen masks at altitudes where Japanese fighters cannot reach, a technological advantage that transforms night mining missions from suicide runs into routine operations. Major General Curtis LeMay's directive echoes in every crew member's mind. Gentlemen, we are going to lay a minefield that will make the English Channel look like a swimming pool. The 313th Bombardment Wing has trained for months on this unconventional mission, learning to navigate by radar rather than visual landmarks, to fly precise courses at low altitude, and to release their deadly cargo with surgical precision. The Mark 25 mines nestled in the bomb bay represent the cutting edge of naval warfare technology. Each contains magnetic sensors calibrated to detect the steel hull of a ship passing overhead, acoustic microphones that listen for propeller noise, and pressure sensors that respond to the displacement of water by a vessel's passage. Some mines are preset with ship-counting mechanisms, designed to allow the first few vessels to pass safely before arming themselves, making Japanese mine-sweeping efforts nearly impossible. As the Rematroid reaches the initial point of its bombing run, Kearney calls out course corrections over the intercom. "Pilot, come left 2 degrees. We're 1 mile from the release point." The precision required for effective mine laying exceeds that of any bombing mission the crew has flown. Each mine must be placed within a 100-yard circle to create an effective barrier across the shipping channel. Behind them, 23 other B-29s from the 313th Bombardment Wing follow in loose formation, each carrying similar loads of mines destined for different sectors of the Shimonoseki Straits. Tonight's mission will place nearly 600 mines across Japan's most critical inland shipping route, effectively closing it to merchant traffic within days. The irony is not lost on the American crews. While Japanese kamikaze pilots sacrifice their lives in desperate attacks against Allied naval forces, American airmen are quietly laying the groundwork for Japan's economic strangulation from the safety of their pressurized cockpits, protected by altitude and technology that the enemy cannot match. 3,000 miles away, in the sprawling Boeing plant in Wichita, Kansas, the night shift works under brilliant mercury vapor lamps that turn the factory floor into an industrial cathedral. The rhythmic hammering of pneumatic riveters creates a metallic symphony as women workers, many of them wives and mothers whose husbands serve overseas, assemble the aluminum sections that will become B-29 Superfortresses. Rosie Patterson, a former school teacher from Topeka, guides red-hot rivets into precisely drilled holes along the bomber's wing section. The aluminum skin, heated to 800 degrees during the riveting process, glows cherry red before cooling to its natural silver finish. Each wing requires over 12,000 rivets, and Rosie can place 40 rivets per hour with mechanical precision that would have been impossible without months of training. The numbers tell the story of American industrial supremacy. Boeing's Wichita plant alone produces 4 B-29s per day, while the entire Japanese aircraft industry struggles to build 30 bombers per month. The Wright Aeronautical Corporation delivers 48 R-3350 engines daily from their Lockland, Ohio facility, more engines in a single day than Japan produces in 2 months of maximum effort. Overhead, traveling cranes move completed bomb bay sections to the final assembly area, where hydraulic systems, electrical components, and pressurization equipment transform aluminum shells into flying fortresses. The bomb bay modifications for mine-carrying missions require only minor changes: removal of standard bomb shackles and installation of specialized mine racks capable of supporting the 800-pound Mark 25 mines. In the adjacent building, workers assemble the mines themselves. The Mark 25's spherical steel case, manufactured at the Naval Torpedo Station in Newport, Rhode Island, arrives by railroad, along with Torpex explosive charges mixed at the DuPont plant in Delaware. The magnetic influence mechanism, a technological marvel that can detect a ship's steel hull from 60 feet below the surface, comes from the General Electric facility in Schenectady, New York. The production statistics dwarf Japanese capabilities. American factories complete 1 Mark 25 mine every 18 minutes around the clock, while Japanese shipyards require 3 weeks to build a single minesweeper. By March 1945, American stockpiles contain over 15,000 naval mines ready for deployment, more than the entire Japanese Navy possesses in all categories of ordnance combined. Plant Supervisor Harold Jenkins walks the factory floor with the satisfaction of a man who knows his workers are shortening the war with every rivet they drive. "Every B-29 that rolls out of here," he tells the night shift foreman, "carries enough firepower to sink a Japanese convoy." What he doesn't yet know is that the mines these bombers will carry will prove more effective than conventional bombs at strangling Japan's ability to continue fighting. On the coral airstrip of Tinian Island, Major General Curtis LeMay stands in the humid Pacific dawn, watching ground crews load Mark 25 mines into the bomb bays of 30 B-29 Superfortresses. The mechanical precision of the loading operation reflects months of training and preparation for Operation Starvation, the aerial mining campaign that LeMay believes will accomplish what 3 years of submarine warfare and strategic bombing have failed to achieve: the complete severance of Japan's maritime supply lines. LeMay's weathered face, scarred by years of high-altitude flying and burned by Pacific sun, reveals nothing of his satisfaction as he watches the 313th Bombardment Wing prepare for what may be the war's most decisive campaign. The statistics that cross his desk daily tell a story of overwhelming American advantage. His command operates over 300 B-29s from bases across the Mariana Islands, while Japanese fighter strength in the home islands has dwindled to fewer than 50 operational aircraft capable of intercepting high-altitude bombers. The Mark 25 mines being loaded into each aircraft represent a quantum leap in naval warfare technology. Unlike the contact mines of World War I, which exploded only when ships struck them directly, these influence mines can destroy vessels passing within a 60-foot radius. Their magnetic sensors respond to the steel hull of any ship larger than a fishing boat, while acoustic sensors detect propeller noise and pressure sensors measure water displacement. Technical Sergeant Robert Walsh, a pre-war machinist from Detroit, supervises the delicate process of arming the mine fuses. Each mine can be preset with delayed activation, allowing Japanese vessels to pass safely for days or weeks before the mine becomes active, making minesweeping operations nearly impossible. Some mines include ship-counting mechanisms that permit a predetermined number of vessels to pass before arming, ensuring that Japanese commanders can never predict when a previously safe channel will become lethal. The loading process requires extreme care. Each 800-pound mine must be precisely positioned in the bomb bay rack and secured with multiple safety devices. The Torpex explosive charge contains 50% more destructive power than conventional TNT, capable of breaking the back of a 10,000-ton merchant vessel. A single B-29 carries enough mines to close a major shipping channel for months. LeMay's operational plan calls for 26 separate mining missions over the next 90 days, placing over 12,000 mines in carefully selected shipping channels around Japan's home islands. The target areas include the Shimonoseki Straits, Kobe Harbor, Tokyo Bay, and the Inland Sea, the vital arteries through which Japan imports food, raw materials, and military supplies. As the loaded B-29s taxi toward the runway, their Wright R-3350 engines warming up with the distinctive sound of 18-cylinder radials, developing 2,200 horsepower. LeMay permits himself a moment of strategic satisfaction. "Gentlemen," he tells his staff officers, "we are about to demonstrate that American technology and industrial production can accomplish what armies and navies cannot: the bloodless strangulation of an empire." At precisely 0347 hours, the bomb bay doors of the Rematroid slide open with a mechanical whine that mingles with the roar of 4 Wright R-3350 engines. 8,000 feet below, the dark waters of Shimonoseki Straits reflect no moonlight. The overcast sky provides perfect cover for the mining mission. Bombardier Captain James Morrison peers through his Norden bomb sight, watching the radar scope that will guide the release of 24 Mark 25 mines. "Bomb bay doors open," Morrison announces over the intercom. The rush of frigid air through the aircraft's belly carries the smell of salt water and diesel fuel from Japanese shipping far below. Each mine, suspended in its specialized rack, weighs 800 pounds and contains enough Torpex explosive to sink a destroyer. The magnetic influence mechanism, calibrated to detect steel hulls at 60 feet, lies dormant until the mine settles into position on the sea floor. Navigator Donald Kearney calls out course corrections with mechanical precision. "Pilot, come right, 1 degree. Range to target, 30 seconds. The radar navigation system, a technological marvel unavailable to Japanese forces, allows pinpoint accuracy in complete darkness. Traditional bombing required visual contact with targets. Mine-laying demands only precise positioning over predetermined coordinates. The release sequence begins with Morrison's calm announcement. Mines away. 24 deadly cylinders tumble from the bomb bay, their parachute retardation systems deploying automatically to ensure proper water entry. Each mine is preset with different activation parameters. Some will arm immediately upon reaching the sea floor, others will remain dormant for weeks before becoming active, and several include ship-counting mechanisms that allow predetermined numbers of vessels to pass safely before arming. Behind the Rematroid, 23 other B-29s from the 313th Bombardment Wing execute identical releases, placing nearly 600 mines across the most critical shipping channel in Japan's transportation network. The precision of the operation reflects months of planning. Mines are positioned to create overlapping fields of destruction while leaving narrow channels that Japanese minesweepers cannot effectively clear as the empty B-29s climb toward their cruising altitude for the return flight to Tinian. Captain Morrison records the mission details in his bombardier's log. Mission completed. All mines released on target. No enemy opposition encountered. What he cannot record is the strategic impact of tonight's work. Within 72 hours, the first merchant vessel will trigger a mine in the Shimonoseki Straits, beginning a campaign of maritime destruction that will prove more effective than 3 years of submarine warfare. The Mark 25 mines now settling into the mud of the Straits floor represent the cutting edge of naval warfare technology. Their magnetic sensors can detect the steel hull of a ship from 60 feet away, while acoustic microphones listen for the specific frequency patterns of propeller noise. Pressure sensors respond to water displacement caused by a vessel's passage, ensuring that no ship above 50 tons can pass safely through the minefield. Japanese naval forces, unaware of the night's activities, continue to route merchant convoys through the Shimonoseki Straits according to established schedules. Their mine-sweeping forces, designed to counter traditional contact mines, lack both the equipment and expertise to deal with influence mines that detonate without physical contact. The merchant vessel Hakusan Maru, carrying 8,000 tons of coal from Kyushu to the steel mills of Kobe, enters Shimonoseki Straits at dawn on March 30th, 3 days after the American mining mission. Captain Takeshi Yamamoto, a veteran of 20 years' service with the Nippon Yusen Line, follows the established shipping channel that has safely carried merchant traffic for decades. At 06:23 hours, the Hakusan Maru passes directly over mine number 247, buried in the muddy bottom 40 feet below the ship's keel. The Mark 25's magnetic sensor detects the vessel's steel hull and triggers the firing circuit. 800 pounds of Torpex explosive detonate with a force equivalent to 1,200 pounds of TNT, creating a water column that reaches 200 feet into the morning sky. The explosion breaks the Hakusan Maru's back, splitting the 8,000-ton vessel into 2 sections that sink within 4 minutes. Of the 37 crew members aboard, only 12 survived to be pulled from the frigid water by a following merchant vessel. Captain Yamamoto, trapped in the bridge as it slides beneath the waves, becomes the first Japanese casualty of Operation Starvation. Within hours, reports of the mysterious sinking reach the Naval General Staff in Tokyo. Commander Hiroshi Nakamura, chief of the Minesweeping Division, studies the survivor accounts with growing alarm. The explosion occurred in deep water, far from any known American submarine activity. No aircraft were observed in the area. The blast pattern suggests a mine detonation, but Japanese intelligence has detected no American mine-laying operations. The truth emerges gradually as more vessels fall victim to the invisible killers planted throughout Japan's coastal waters. The freight steamer Kyokuyo Maru explodes in Kobe Harbor on April 2nd. The tanker Nishin Maru, carrying precious aviation fuel from the Dutch East Indies, disintegrates in Tokyo Bay on April 5th. Each sinking follows the same pattern: sudden, catastrophic explosion without warning or apparent cause. Japanese minesweeping efforts, hampered by obsolete equipment and inexperienced crews, prove woefully inadequate against the sophisticated American mines. The few minesweepers available to the Japanese Navy were designed to counter contact mines that explode only when struck directly. The Mark 25 influence mines detonate in response to magnetic fields, acoustic signatures, and pressure waves, phenomena that conventional sweeping gear cannot trigger or detect. By April 15th, shipping through the Shimonoseki Straits has dropped to 20% of normal levels. Merchant captains, terrorized by the unpredictable explosions, refuse to enter areas where mines might be present. The coal shipments essential to Japan's steel production fall to critical levels. Food imports from Korea and Manchuria, already reduced by submarine attacks, virtually cease as merchant vessels avoid the heavily mined straits. The cascading effects of the mining campaign exceed even American expectations. Japan's rail system, dependent on coal-fired locomotives, begins to break down as fuel supplies dwindle. Electric power generation, relying on coal-fired plants, becomes intermittent. The industrial production essential to Japan's war effort slows dramatically as raw materials fail to reach factories. Commander Nakamura, studying shipping charts marked with red X's indicating mine explosions, realizes the magnitude of the crisis. "The Americans have achieved with a handful of aircraft," he writes in his daily report, "what 3 years of submarine warfare could not accomplish: the complete disruption of our maritime transportation system." In the fishing village of Takematsu on Shikoku Island, the morning catch brings disturbing news along with a daily harvest of sea bream and mackerel. Fisherman Kenji Tanaka, whose family has worked these waters for 8 generations, reports strange underwater explosions that have killed fish for miles around and left the ocean floor scarred with craters. The village rice ration, already reduced to barely subsistence levels, faces further cuts as merchant ships carrying grain from Korea fail to reach Japanese ports. Tanaka's wife, Mashiko, studies the family's ration cards with growing desperation. The monthly allocation of rice has dropped from 3 kilograms per person to less than 2 kilograms, barely enough to sustain life when supplemented with sweet potatoes and barley. Their son, Hiroshi, 17 years old and recently inducted into the People's Volunteer Combat Corps, helps his father repair fishing nets damaged by underwater explosions. The boy's uniform, made from recycled fabric and dyed with persimmon juice instead of proper khaki, reflects Japan's desperate material shortages. His rifle, a World War I vintage Arisaka with a cracked stock, lacks ammunition for training exercises. The village school, where Michiko taught mathematics before the war, has closed due to lack of fuel for heating and paper for books. The children instead work in the fields, cultivating sweet potatoes and vegetable gardens that supplement the failing food distribution system. The iron swing sets in the schoolyard have been removed and melted down for weapons production, leaving only concrete foundations as monuments to peacetime normalcy. Local fishermen report increasing difficulties obtaining fuel for their boats. The small diesel engines that power the village's fishing fleet consume oil refined from coal tar, a poor substitute for petroleum products that Japan can no longer import in sufficient quantities. Many boats remain tied to the dock, their crews reduced to gathering seaweed and shellfish from the shoreline. The village doctor, elderly and overworked, treats increasing cases of malnutrition among children and pregnant women. His medical supplies, once imported from Europe and America, have dwindled to traditional herbal remedies and whatever can be improvised from available materials. Surgical instruments, sterilized with sake instead of proper antiseptics, reflect the breakdown of Japan's medical infrastructure. News from the outside world arrives sporadically through government-controlled radio broadcasts that speak of strategic withdrawals and glorious resistance against Allied forces. But the villagers understand the truth. The merchant ships that once brought prosperity to their coastal community no longer arrive. The fishing boats that venture beyond coastal waters report vast areas of the sea where no vessels dare to travel. Kenji Tanaka, mending nets by lamplight in his small wooden house, listens to distant explosions echoing across the water. "The sea itself has turned against us," he tells his wife. "Something moves beneath the waves that kills without warning." Weiwari. What he cannot know is that American mines, scattered across shipping lanes by invisible B-29s, flying at altitudes beyond Japanese interceptor capability, have created a maritime graveyard that extends from Hokkaido to Kyushu. The village shrine, where families once prayed for successful fishing seasons and safe voyages, now echoes with prayers for peace and the return of prosperity. The bronze bells, requisitioned for weapons production, have been replaced with wooden substitutes that produce hollow, unsatisfying sounds that seem to mock the villagers' hopes. In his headquarters on Guam, Major General Curtis LeMay studies reconnaissance photographs that reveal the mounting success of Operation Starvation. The images, taken by high-altitude Boeing B-29s equipped with specialized cameras, show Japanese ports clogged with merchant vessels afraid to venture into mined waters. Kobe Harbor, once bustling with activity, contains 47 ships anchored in the inner harbor, safe from mines but unable to deliver their desperately needed cargoes. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey's preliminary assessment, delivered to LeMay's desk on May 15th, contains statistics that exceed the most optimistic projections. In 6 weeks of mining operations, aerial mines have sunk or damaged 267 Japanese vessels, totaling 512,000 tons of shipping. This destruction rate surpasses the combined effectiveness of submarine warfare and strategic bombing in terms of tonnage eliminated per sortie flown. LeMay's operational analysis reveals the stunning efficiency of the mining campaign. The 313th. Bombardment Wing has flown only 1,128 sorties to lay 367 mines, representing just 7% of all B-29 missions in the Pacific Theater. Yet these relatively few flights have achieved strategic results that 3 years of conventional bombing failed to produce. The complete disruption of Japan's ability to import food, fuel, and raw materials. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The cascading effects extend far beyond maritime transportation. Japanese steel production, dependent on coal imports from Manchuria and Korea, has fallen to 30% of peak wartime levels. Electric power generation, relying on coal-fired plants, operates intermittently as fuel stocks dwindle. The rail system, backbone of Japan's internal transportation network, faces critical coal shortages that have reduced freight movement to emergency deliveries only. Intelligence reports from Japanese radio intercepts reveal growing desperation within the Imperial General Staff. Emergency meetings in Tokyo focus increasingly on domestic resource allocation rather than military operations. The Japanese Army's plans for defending the home islands against Allied invasion have been compromised by the inability to transport troops and equipment between islands. LeMay's staff officers analyzing shipping data captured from Japanese sources document the mathematical precision of Japan's economic collapse. Merchant traffic through the Shimonoseki Straits, the vital link between Japan's main islands, has dropped from 1.2 million tons per month in January to 180,000 tons in May. Petroleum imports, essential for aviation fuel and naval operations, have virtually ceased as tanker captains refuse to risk passage through mined waters. The psychological impact proves as devastating as the physical destruction. Japanese merchant sailors, once confident in their ability to evade submarine attacks through speed and evasion, find themselves helpless against an invisible enemy that strikes without warning. Insurance rates for merchant voyages have increased to 40% of cargo value, making trade economically impossible even when ships are available. American mine production continues at maximum capacity, with factories delivering over 500 mines per day to Pacific bases. The Mark 36 mine, an improved version with enhanced sensitivity and a larger warhead, enters production in June 1945. These newer weapons can detect and destroy submarines as well as surface vessels, closing Japan's remaining options for maritime transportation. LeMay reviews the strategic implications with growing satisfaction. "Gentlemen," he tells his staff, "we have demonstrated that American industrial production and technological innovation can accomplish what armies cannot, the bloodless conquest of an empire. Japan may still possess armies and aircraft, but without ships to supply them, they are merely armed prisoners on their own islands." The final assessment, submitted to the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington, concludes that aerial mining has proven more cost-effective than any other weapon system in the Pacific War. Each mine costs $1,500 to produce and deploy, while each ship sunk is worth an average of $2.3 million, creating a return on investment of over 1,500%. At the Sasebo Naval Arsenal, Chief Petty Officer Nobuo Watanabe supervises the desperate effort to maintain Japan's dwindling minesweeping fleet. The facilities, once capable of building destroyers and cruisers, now focus entirely on converting fishing boats and patrol craft into improvised minesweepers. The converted vessels, lacking proper equipment and trained crews, suffer catastrophic losses when they encounter American-influenced mines. The statistics paint a grim picture of Japanese naval decline. Of the 349 vessels assigned to minesweeping duties, 127 have been sunk or damaged by the very mines they attempted to clear. The specialized equipment required for dealing with influence, mines, degaussing cables, acoustic hammers, and pressure wave generators, simply does not exist in Japanese inventories. Most minesweepers carry obsolete gear designed for contact mines that explode only when struck directly. Watanabe's crew works 18-hour shifts modifying the patrol boat Chidori with improvised sweeping gear constructed from available materials. Steel cables salvaged from damaged warships serve as crude degaussing equipment, while church bells requisitioned from Buddhist temples provide acoustic noisemakers intended to trigger sound-sensitive minds. The modifications, completed in 3 days instead of the 3 weeks proper installation would require, reflect Japan's desperate shortage of time and materials. The human cost of minesweeping operations exceeds that of any other naval activity. The average life expectancy of a minesweeper crew in Japanese service has dropped to 17 days. Young sailors, some barely 18 years old, volunteer for minesweeping duty, knowing that survival is unlikely. Their courage, while admirable, cannot overcome the technological superiority of American mine warfare systems. Training for minesweeping operations takes place in the relative safety of the inland sea, but even these protected waters contain American mines that claim training vessels with disturbing regularity. The minesweeper Hayabusa, conducting exercises with dummy equipment, strikes a Mark 25 mine that has been dormant for 6 weeks before activating. The explosion kills 23 sailors and destroys the only trained minesweeping crew available for the Kur Naval District. Japanese attempts to develop countermeasures against American mines face insurmountable technical challenges. The magnetic influence mechanisms require sophisticated electronic equipment that Japan cannot manufacture in sufficient quantities. Even when captured mines are recovered and analyzed, Japanese engineers lack the industrial capacity to produce effective countermeasures in meaningful numbers. The psychological toll on minesweeping crews manifests in declining morale and increasing desertion rates. Sailors assigned to minesweeping duty understand that they face almost certain death in service of a hopeless cause. Some crews deliberately sabotage their equipment to avoid dangerous missions, while others simply abandon their vessels and disappear into the civilian population. Communications intercepts reveal growing friction between the Navy and civilian shipping companies over responsibility for mine clearance. Merchant captains refuse to enter areas declared swept by naval forces, having witnessed too many cleared. Channels claim vessels within hours of receiving official safety certification. The breakdown of trust between military and civilian maritime authorities further complicates Japan's already impossible logistics situation. Watanabe, reviewing casualty reports in his cramped office overlooking Sasebo Harbor, understands that Japan's minesweeping effort represents a futile gesture against overwhelming American technological superiority. "We are fighting the ocean itself," he writes in his personal diary. "The Americans have turned our own waters against us, and we lack the tools to reclaim them." In the heavily fortified bunker beneath the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, the Supreme Council for the Direction of the War convenes for an emergency session on July 20, 1945. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki, Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo, and War Minister Kurochika Anami study shipping reports that document the complete collapse of Japan's maritime transportation system. The statistics presented by Navy Minister Mitsumasa Yanai paint a picture of strategic catastrophe unprecedented in Japanese history. Merchant shipping capacity has fallen from 6.4 million tons in 1941 to fewer than 1.8 million tons in July 1945. More devastating than the absolute numbers is the utilization rate of available shipping. Less than 30% dares to operate in Japanese coastal waters due to the American mining campaign. Coal imports, essential for steel production and electric power generation, have dropped to 8% of wartime requirements. The Yawata Steel Works, Japan's largest metallurgical facility, operates at 15% of capacity due to fuel shortages. Without steel production, ammunition manufacturing has virtually ceased, leaving Japanese forces with dwindling supplies of artillery shells and small arms cartridges. Food imports from Korea and Manchuria, traditionally Japan's agricultural lifeline, have been reduced to emergency shipments that risk destruction by mines with each voyage. The government's food distribution system, already strained by wartime rationing, faces complete breakdown as merchant vessels avoid the heavily mined shipping channels between the Asian, Mainland and Japanese ports. Intelligence. Reports from Japanese agents in neutral countries describe American mine. Production capabilities that dwarf Japan's entire ordnance. Manufacturing capacity. United States factories produce more naval mines in a single day than Japan can manufacture in 6 months. The technological gap extends beyond quantity to quality. American influence mines incorporate electronic systems that Japanese industry cannot duplicate, even with captured. Examples: military advisors present increasingly desperate scenarios for defending the home islands against Allied invasion. The plan for Operation Ketsugo, the final defense of Japan, assumes the ability to transport troops and supplies between islands, an assumption now impossible to fulfill due to mined waters around every major port. Army units stationed on outlying islands have become isolated garrisons, unable to reinforce the main defensive positions. The psychological impact on Japanese leadership becomes evident in the increasingly erratic nature of strategic planning. Proposals range from negotiated surrender to suicidal resistance, reflecting the government's inability to develop coherent policy in the face of impossible circumstances. The mining campaign has achieved what 3 years of strategic bombing could not: the complete destruction of Japanese confidence in their ability to continue the war. Emperor Hirohito's private comments, recorded by court officials, reveal his growing awareness that Japan faces inevitable defeat. "The enemy has achieved mastery of our waters without conquering our shores," he observes. "What hope remains when our islands have become prisons surrounded by an invisible fleet?" Foreign Minister Togo's cables to Japanese diplomats in neutral countries increasingly focus on finding terms for surrender rather than continuing resistance. The mining campaign has eliminated Japan's ability to threaten Allied shipping, removing the final bargaining chip that might have secured favorable surrender terms. The session concludes with the recognition that Japan's strategic position has become untenable. War Minister Anami, long an advocate for continued resistance, acknowledges that the mining campaign has accomplished what conventional warfare could not: the transformation of Japan from an island empire into an isolated archipelago dependent on enemy mercy for survival. In the war room of the Pentagon, 3 months after Japan's surrender, the United States Strategic Bombing Survey completes its comprehensive analysis of air power's contribution to Allied victory. The section devoted to Operation Starvation contains conclusions that will reshape military doctrine for decades. Aerial mining proved more cost-effective than any other weapon system employed in the Pacific Theater. Colonel William Thompson, leading the survey team, presents statistics that seem almost impossible to believe. The 313th Bombardment Wing's mining missions, representing just 5.9% of all B-29 sorties in the Pacific, sank or damaged 670 Japanese vessels totaling 1,250,000 tons of shipping. This destruction rate exceeded the combined effectiveness of 3 years of submarine warfare and strategic bombing campaigns. The cost-effectiveness analysis reveals the true magnitude of the mining campaign's success. Each B-29 mining sortie cost approximately $20,000 to execute, including aircraft amortization, fuel, ordnance, and crew pay. The average value of Japanese shipping destroyed per sortie exceeded $180,000, creating a return on investment of 900%. No other military operation in the war achieved comparable efficiency. Major General Curtis LeMay, now commanding the Strategic Air Command, reviews the survey results with the satisfaction of vindicated judgment. His decision to emphasize mining operations over conventional bombing, initially controversial among his staff, has been proven strategically decisive. "We demonstrated," LeMay tells the Pentagon briefing, "that American industrial capacity and technological innovation could accomplish what armies and navies could, not the bloodless conquest of an empire." Survey teams' interviews with Japanese officials provide insight into the enemy's perspective on the mining campaign. Admiral Somu Toyoda, former commander of the Combined Fleet, acknowledges that Japanese naval forces were helpless against American mining operations. "We could fight submarines and aircraft," he admits, "but we had no defense against weapons that turned our own waters into killing fields. Technical analysis of captured Japanese documents reveals the extent to which mining operations exceeded enemy countermeasures capability. Japanese mine-sweeping forces designed to counter contact mines proved completely inadequate against influence mines that detected magnetic fields, acoustic signatures, and pressure waves. The technological gap between American and Japanese mine warfare systems represented a generation of advancement compressed into 3 years of wartime development. The human cost of the mining campaign, while significant for Japanese forces, was minimal for American aircrews. The 313th Bombardment Wing lost 16 B-29s during mining operations, a casualty rate of less than 1% per sortie. This exceptionally low loss rate reflected the technological advantages of high-altitude flight, radar navigation, and night operations that Japanese defensive systems could not counter effectively. Strategic implications of the survey extend beyond the immediate context of the Pacific War. The mining campaign demonstrated that naval blockade, traditionally requiring large surface fleets and extended operations, could be achieved through air power alone. This revelation influences post-war military planning and contributes to the development of nuclear-powered aircraft and improved mine warfare systems. Colonel Thompson's final report concludes with recommendations that will shape American military doctrine for the Cold War era. The efficiency of aerial mining operations, he writes, suggests that future conflicts may be decided by technological and industrial superiority rather than traditional military virtues. The side that combines advanced weapon systems with overwhelming production capacity will possess decisive advantages that courage and skill cannot overcome. The survey team's work, classified for 20 years after the war's end, eventually becomes the foundation for understanding how American industrial democracy defeated totalitarian military systems through superior technology and production capacity rather than battlefield heroics alone. Along the scarred coastline of Japan, the dangerous work of mine clearance continues long after Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast. American and Japanese teams work together to remove the thousands of mines that still threaten commercial shipping in Japanese waters. The Mark 25 mines, designed for extended underwater deployment, remain active years after the war's end, claiming vessels attempting to restore normal maritime commerce. Lieutenant Commander Robert Hayes of the United States Navy Mine Warfare School supervises clearance operations in Kobe Harbor, where 247 mines were laid during Operation Starvation. The sophisticated influence mechanisms that made American mines so effective during wartime now complicate peaceful removal efforts. Many mines were preset with delayed activation timers that continue to function years after deployment, making clearance operations as dangerous as wartime minesweeping. Japanese minesweeping crews, working under American supervision, employ equipment provided by the U.S. Navy to clear their own coastal waters. The irony is not lost on Petty Officer Kenji Nakamura, whose brother died attempting to clear these same mines during the war. "The Americans taught us how to lay these weapons," he observes, "and now they teach us how to remove them." The technical challenges of mine clearance exceed those faced during wartime deployment. Mines buried in harbor mud for months have become difficult to locate even with sophisticated detection equipment. Acoustic and magnetic sweeping. Gear must be carefully calibrated to trigger mine. Mechanisms without endangering clearance. Vessels, a delicate process that requires perfect coordination between American and Japanese. Cruise salvage operations reveal the extent of shipping losses inflicted by the mining campaign. In Tokyo Bay alone, 63 merchant vessels lie on the harbor bottom, victims of mines that detonated without warning during the final months of the war. The largest casualty, the passenger liner Awa Maru, carried 2,004 passengers and crew. When it struck a Mark 25 mine in April 1945, only 9 survivors were rescued from the frigid waters. Economic reconstruction of Japan's maritime industry depends entirely on successful mine clearance. Insurance companies refuse to cover shipping in Japanese waters until official clearance certificates are issued by joint American-Japanese survey teams. The Lloyd's of London syndicate requires proof that 100% of mines have been removed before normal. Commercial rates will apply, a standard that may be impossible to achieve given the muck. Sophistication of American mine technology. Former enemies work side by side in the dangerous task of removing weapons that once epitomized their conflict. American explosive ordnance disposal specialists teach Japanese Navy divers techniques for safely disarming mines found on harbor bottoms. The collaboration, born of necessity, creates unexpected bonds between men who recently sought each other's destruction. The human toll of mine clearance operations adds to the war's casualty lists long after fighting has ended. The minesweeper Ukishima, clearing approaches to Sasebo Harbor, strikes a delayed activation mine in October 1946, killing 18 American and Japanese sailors working together to restore peaceful commerce. Their sacrifice illustrates the continuing cost of wartime weapons designed to kill indiscriminately. Progress in mine clearance varies by location and mine density. Simple harbors with limited mining receive clearance certificates within months, while complex areas, like the Shimonoseki Straits, require years of systematic sweeping. The narrow waters between Honshu and Kyushu, so critical to Japan's internal transportation, remain partially closed to shipping until 1948. International maritime law evolves in response to the mining campaign's legacy. New conventions require detailed documentation of mine placements and characteristics to facilitate post-war clearance. The American example of providing technical assistance for removing their own weapons becomes a model for future conflicts. On a quiet morning in October 1975, 30 years after the war's end, Donald W. Kearney sits in his study in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, holding the navigator's logbook from his service aboard the B-29 Reamatroid. The leather-bound book, yellowed with age and worn from handling, contains precise coordinates and timing notations from mining missions that helped end the Pacific War. Kearney, now a retired agricultural engineer for John Deere Company, has been invited to speak at the Naval War College about Operation Starvation. The audience of young officers born after the war's end struggles to understand how aerial mining achieved strategic results that 3 years of conventional bombing could not produce. The statistics he presents seem impossible to modern listeners. 670 ships sunk or damaged by just 46 mining missions. His personal recollections provide human context for the strategic statistics. We flew at night using radar navigation that the Japanese could not intercept or jam. Our pressurized cabins allowed us to operate at altitudes where enemy fighters could not reach us. Each mission placed dozens of mines that would continue killing ships for months after we returned to base. The technological advantages that made Operation Starvation possible represent a watershed moment in military history. American industry's ability to produce sophisticated influence mines in vast quantities, combined with the B-29's unmatched range and payload capacity, created capabilities that no enemy could counter effectively. Japanese attempts at minesweeping, hampered by obsolete equipment and inadequate training, proved futile against weapons designed for extended underwater deployment. Kearney's presentation includes recently declassified photographs showing the results of the mining campaign. Images of Kobe Harbor in July 1945 revealed dozens of merchant vessels anchored in the inner harbor, afraid to venture into waters where mines waited invisibly. The port's loading docks stand empty, their cranes idle for lack of ships willing to risk passage through mined channels. Questions from the Naval War College audience reflect modern perspectives on warfare and ethics. Young officers ask whether the mining campaign constituted a legitimate military operation or an attack on civilian commerce. Kearney's response draws on 3 decades of post-war reflection. We were fighting a totalitarian empire that showed no mercy to its enemies. Our mines shortened the war and saved lives on both sides by making invasion of Japan unnecessary. The strategic lessons of Operation Starvation continue to influence military planning in the modern era. The demonstration that air power alone could achieve naval blockade revolutionized thinking about power projection and economic warfare. Subsequent conflicts in Korea and Vietnam incorporated mining operations, based directly on techniques developed during World War II. Personal correspondence between Kearney and former Japanese naval officers provides unique insight into the enemy's perspective on the mining campaign. Admiral Toshitane Takata, who commanded mine-sweeping operations during the war, writes, "Your mines were invisible, untouchable, and inexhaustible. We could fight your submarines and aircraft, but we had no answer to weapons that turned our own seas against us." The legacy of the 313th Bombardment Wing extends beyond military history into the realm of technological development. The radar navigation systems that guided mining missions became the foundation for civilian aviation and space exploration. The industrial techniques that produced thousands of mines evolved into peacetime manufacturing processes that transformed American industry. As Kearney closes his logbook and prepares to return it to its place of honor in his study, he reflects on the broader meaning of his wartime service. We demonstrated that American democracy, properly equipped and determined, could overcome any tyranny. The mines we laid in Japanese waters were products of free men working in free factories, building weapons that free peoples could use to defend civilization itself. If you enjoyed the story I hand-picked this next story that you will enjoy, please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.